No, I just think music shouldn't be constrained to a certain style.
John, I'm talking about content.
Yeah, maybe you don't like it.
No, I just don't like sometimes when like
A lot of people like that song.
freestyle, you come out with a really cool song and your next song.
Mute it?
Huh?
Are you gonna mute it?
No.
No.
Yeah, we're live right now. Yeah, it's good to go.
I just heard that ding before.
Can everyone hear me okay? Everything good? Should be. Am I forgetting anything? Start recording. In case. That's your phone, not my phone. Okay, just making sure. Wow, look at this. That was like the most streamlined setup we've ever had. All right. Welcome, everyone. Let me just pull up my notes for the day. Thanks, everyone, for coming. We'll be conducting a stream lesson on competitive techniques. So techniques that only are applicable in a competition setting. This doesn't necessarily just mean grappling techniques. It also means strategic techniques. Most of what we're going to cover today is strategic as far as trying to grapple under the realm of IBJJF points. So that's the focus today. There's ADCC strategy for their point system, and then there's IBJJF strategy, and then there's some strategy in between for different point systems. But today, we're in the gi, we're focusing on IBJJF. And the IBJJF has a very, very complex rule system. There's a lot of little minutia in the details of IBJJF scoring and how they work, and the interactions between two bodies as they grapple in this point system can be pretty tricky. And it's tough to navigate because there's a lot of control given to referees, and the referees, it's kind of up to how they perceive an instance happening in the grappling match. And because especially at the higher level, people have such specific games, and it's very clear what that person is trying to do to themselves, but it can be less clear what you're trying to accomplish to a ref. So you kind of have to play by their rules, and that can be constraining to some people. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes rules are good. In this situation, they actually provide a lot of opportunities to outthink someone who might be more physically capable than you. And so for your next competition, you'll walk away from this series of lessons with a few more tools in the shed, as they say. You'll know what to do. How's everyone doing today? Good. Some people are getting jealous of our live streaming, huh? People are trying to hit us up to host shows for them through our live stream setups because we got it going on, because we have the best live stream in jiu-jitsu today. I want to make that very clear. It's the best. There's nothing quite like it. You guys are all enjoying yourself. It seems like I was just driving around here before this, kind of just taking a look at some of the shops, and it looks like a lot of the different shops are closing up more So San Diego seems to be taking the isolation a little more seriously. I've seen a lot of different news broadcasts for the local San Diego news of what they're doing here, and it seems to be kind of tightening up over here as well. Even though the outbreak in San Diego is not super crazy right now compared to some of the other places. So that's like, it's good news and it's bad news. It's good news that the outbreak isn't crazy, and it's also good news that they're taking more steps to push the isolation further to really make sure they cut this thing off. So I'm hopeful. Yeah, people are still walking around in New York City. This guy here George is from New York City, he says, and he's been walking around dressed like a ninja. People in the Midwest are still not wearing masks when they go shopping. Yeah, here too. It's getting better. People are wearing masks now more, but you just can't get masks. There's just no masks to get, so it's kind of an awkward situation. I've been seeing people buying like these like decorative fabric masks that they're getting on like Wish app or something, but it's better than nothing. I was also thinking at some point we should probably organize some sort of like GoFundMe thing for local jiu-jitsu gyms. Yeah. It would be easy to just throw something up potentially and try and, I don't know, maybe if we can get Flow Grappling involved in something like that, that would be a good impact we could make. I'm concerned about the jiu-jitsu community. I'm concerned overall the impact this is going to have on everyone. But let's move away from the dark stuff. Let's get into the fun competition stuff. So today I'm not expecting you guys to have too many questions. I know Cosmo here has some questions. We can answer those for sure. I'll actually make a note of Cosmo's question because I have kind of a list of things that I wanted to go over. Scoring advantages. He had a question about scoring advantages, and scoring advantages is a very important aspect because an advantage is almost as good as a point, and sometimes you enter situations in competition where you know that you have a pretty slim chance of passing the person's guard or scoring on them decisively, and sometimes having your game plan be primarily to out advantage your opponent, it's a good strategy. It can work for you and against you. Like for instance, in one of my matches at Worlds last year, there was like 10 advantage points against me, but I managed to secure a sweep, and it kind of wipes all those points away. So it's an interesting dynamic. You got to kind of balance this. Like 2 points outweighs 500 advantages. So what's really worth it? You kind of have to play with it, and that's where the strategy comes in, because it could be very different from your in the gym practice style. And I think that's why some people have a hard time transitioning into IBJJF competitions, is they continue to grapple as if they were in the gym. And it's a kind of a dichotomy because you want to be able to capture that same sense of yourself that you have when you're training in a gym, where you kind of feel like not scared of anything, you're not really anxious of anything, you just go out and you fight your hardest and your best, and that's really good to be able to capture that and bring it to a competition. But then in competition, you're under all these restraints with the points and the boundaries and the ref, and you have to like behave kind of in a certain way, and it just changes the whole environment. And it's important to be prepared for that. And the only way to be prepared for that is to train in the gym as if you are going to go compete. And that's going to be kind of the premise of the lesson today, is how to train in the gym and what you need to be looking for in the gym so that when it happens in competition, you recognize it. And this can kind of have a stigma associated with it in the jiu-jitsu community, like if you're playing for points or you're worrying about out of bounds, or you're calling illegal grips when the guy makes an illegal grip on you in training, or maybe you're using the out of bounds to score points with various submission attacks, and then you roll out of bounds in the gym, you say it's 2 points, the guy's going to be like, what, you didn't tap me? Well, it's like, yeah, well, we went out of bounds. It's like, well, why are you doing that? Well, because I'm trying to train for a competition environment where there would be out of bounds, and I want to be prepared. And so it's kind of a weird thing. Everyone's got to be on the same page. And when we were teaching classes here at Legion, and when we start back up again, some of the competition classes, we were focusing on that. One day a week or 2 days out of the week, as Pan Ams was coming up, me and Andres were strategizing on how to incorporate some of those things. And I have a few tricks here today, which I've used throughout my career, which I think can help everyone kind of just refocus on how to train like you're trying to win some competitions. And if that's not your deal, you don't care about competitions, no big deal. Don't worry about it. This is for people who want to learn about that. And it's the complete opposite of what we've been doing for the street jiu-jitsu days. Because the street jiu-jitsu days, it's sort of anything goes. We're trying to just figure it out. That's a whole different style of jiu-jitsu compared to what we're doing today or in competition, right? And the grappling looks different too. Just like when we were doing the street jiu-jitsu yesterday, it's kind of just like chaos, right? You're not really looking for positions of advantage as far as mount and stuff like that. Honestly, mount doesn't feel very strong in those positions because like they can bridge so much. It's so difficult to maintain mount because most of mount control comes from like underhooks and controlling the head. And when you're trying to like punch someone, you don't have that same control. You just get kind of flopped off. It seems like some of the other positions are better for actually controlling someone so they can't get away. And in IBJJF, it's the total opposite. For IBJJF competition, you have to really focus on these positional controls, and the positions are rewarded for points. And you don't have as much creativity with what you can do with what's actually effective. Does that make sense to everyone? My problem is that I know all my training partners' moves, and I have anxiety not knowing who I'm competing against. I always win matches against guys I have competed against before. Oh, this is Colin. Guys, Colin Gauntlet's in the chat. Colin designed the Legion logo. I didn't even recognize that was you, Colin.
You're not going to be able to do it.
Oh, man. I can do it from my phone. That's a great question, Colin. Before I answer it, I want to make sure I mod you so I don't lose you in the chat here. And I do have a good answer for that. I just have to find myself. Albert's in here every day. Good to see you, Albert. All right, so I think a lot of people deal with that same issue that Colin's dealing with, where it's sort of just the unknown, the uncertainty of competition. And that's why competition is so important to go and do, right? Like it's scary and it's awkward and you're nervous and you're anxious and it's not exactly the most pleasant experience overall. For some people it is, but for the majority of people I would say it's not exactly like super fun. Like afterwards you look back and it was fun, obviously it was a good experience, whatever. Win or lose, you're probably gonna look back at it fondly, but during, it's very stressful. And that uncertainty I think is the root cause of that stress. And the right answer is just go and compete as much as you possibly can, because the more you compete, the more you're going to be exposed to and more kind of crazy styles. But the thing that's important for me when I go to compete is just feeling the difference in intensity, not necessarily what the person's going to do. Yes, you'll meet techniques that you've never seen before, but it's more difficult, in my opinion, to deal with someone who fights like with their adrenaline in competition. Because like when I go to fight in competition, everything I'm doing is trying to like calm myself and like suppress the adrenaline and try and fight with like some focus on like what I want to actually perform. But a lot of people do the opposite and they try and hype themselves up. And the more amped they get, the more strength they're going to exert. And so when you go to competitions, you roll with that guy in the first round. The reason most people are just burned out in the first round or their forearms are burning is the combination of the adrenaline dump and just squeezing too hard on their grips, squeezing harder than you realize because of the adrenaline, and that burns out your forearms. And facing that has always been difficult for me because I'm trying to like suppress my anxiety and my angst about the situation, and then I'm fighting someone who maybe didn't do that. And there's this sort of yin-yang thing that happens where someone attacking super hard versus my like more cautious approach can kind of overwhelm me. And I've had some pretty tough first round matches because of that. And the only way to deal with it obviously is just go get used to that feeling. But the other thing you can do is try and simulate that a little bit in the training. So you can have super fights at the end of class where everyone circles up around you and kind of simulates that stress environment where if you win or you lose, it has a real impact on you, at least emotionally, because it's like you lost or you won in front of all your friends and training partners. And that's a valuable thing, and it shouldn't be overlooked. It's good to put yourself in those uncomfortable situations. And as far as dealing with techniques that you don't really see as often, really that comes down to your personal study. Like you have to kind of create these situations. Like if you saw someone do a technique somewhere else online, in another competition, maybe against you in the past, but no one in your gym trains that, like that's why you have to put yourself in those scenarios and put yourself there to try and deal with it. I used to spend a lot of time trying to fight out of bad positions. For the majority of my training, honestly, I would put myself intentionally in spots that I was uncomfortable with or felt that I didn't have as good of defense as I should have, and I would artificially create those situations to try and put myself there. Even though most of the time when I was training, I wasn't put in too bad of positions. Usually only with like 2 or 3 guys in the gym could put me in bad positions, but most of the other people, I had to kind of like build my training around what I needed to improve. And that's just deliberate practice. It's just identifying where you're weak and then directly trying to attack that weakness by forcing yourself into that weak position over and over and over again. And over the past couple of years, I think I kind of strayed away from that because I was training with, when I was training over at Autos, and a lot of the really talented guys started showing up, like Keenan and Jonatas and some of the really tough Brazilians over there. My training changed from like focusing on improving my weaknesses to just like 100% A game all the time, only try and win because that's the only thing that works. Because if you try and give up position against these really good guys, if you don't fight at your very best optimal area of expertise, you're probably going to lose. And I think that's not good. I mean, there's obviously benefits to that, but you need the opposite. And I was always just only training with the very best guys I could find because I really like that feeling of getting pushed and challenged like that and kind of beat up. But it's important to take time to step back from that and focus on where you're weaker. And that's what having the gym here, Legion, has done for me. And I think it's very valuable, is to just train with people who you can actually put yourself in bad positions and they can take advantage of those bad positions, and it's more fair. Whereas if someone who's way better than you takes advantage of those bad positions, you're not going to get the same benefit. So there's definitely ways to deal with that anxiety, Colin, and that uncertainty. But you have to kind of be creative about how you do it, because the only other option is just to compete as much as possible. So that was kind of a long answer to a simple question, but it's something I've dealt with personally, and I'm still dealing with. I'm by no means a master of managing my uncertainty in competition, but it's definitely something to think about. So would you say hyping yourself up is detrimental? Not necessarily. It's something that everyone has to do for themselves and kind of figure out what works for them. Some people really like to listen to music, a certain type of music, and they listen to certain types of music for different purposes. Some people use it to hype themselves up. Some people use it to calm themselves down. And you have to find where you lay at in the spectrum of performance. Do you perform better when you're hyped up, or do you perform better when you're more mellow and calm? For me, I'm like somewhere in the middle, but I feel like for my own mental health, going to all these tournaments all the time and fighting under this stress level, I have to just kind of focus on like the more calm side. Even though aggression is really good and being intense is really good from a competitive setting, it kind of wears on me in my mental state to like always have to be on like that and always be in like fight or flight mode. So I've been trying through most of my career to be functional and competitive and still perform well, while not like fraying my nerves and destroying my nerves from like always forcing myself into that really hyped up, amped scenario. Can anyone sign up for an IBJJF tournament? Yes, I think the only ones that you need points for are black belt major events, and you have to compete at different IBJJF events to score those points to qualify. Do you try to score first in the tournament? Wow, there are some good questions today in the chat, actually. Do you try and score first in a tournament? Do you feel that puts you ahead of your opponent, or it doesn't matter who scores first? I would say scoring first is really good. I think back when, what was his name? There was like a jiu-jitsu channel that was doing like scientific jiu-jitsu breakdowns of like different stats and things that performed well versus other things. I forgot the guy's name, but I'll remember it. But he made one where he kind of compared a bunch of matches. I think he looked through 100 different matches and analyzed how many of the matches resulted in a win for the person who scored first. And it was something like 57 or like almost 60% of matches where the one person scored first, they eventually won. That's Tyler Bishop, that's him, yeah. I knew that. He's Jenna Bishop's husband. And I know Tyler, it's just slipping my mind. But I forgot what it was called. He had an actual channel called something, but I think he stopped. But anyways, yeah, Tyler Bishop did a little study on this, and he found a correlation between scoring first and victory, a slight correlation. But that's first most of the time. And then also they're just going to win because they're mostly better. Yeah, Bishop BJJ was his, I'm not sure if it was the channel. I think it was a website. But yeah, so There's two ways that could go. It could just be because the person who's better scores first 60% of the time, and then usually the person who's better wins the match. Or it could be that they scored first and that allowed them to have tempo. So they have the tempo of the match because now they're fighting from a lead and the other person's fighting from a deficit. And when you're fighting from a deficit, you make mistakes because you have to take greater risks to get those points back. And there's a little bit of pressure on you to move and do something and act, and the other person can kind of play more safe and defensive. So you have the opportunity of regaining tempo because they're playing more safe and defensive, but if they continue attacking, then you're just down. That's actually how I fight most of the time. Usually I get scored on first. I'm pretty bad in the beginning of my matches, historically, even in training. Like almost the beginning of every single round I have with Miha, he just throws the shit out of me or takes me down or puts me in a really bad position. I kind of have to like work back from that. I don't know why that is exactly. Maybe I'm just not as aware. Maybe I just don't have good takedowns. Maybe Miha just has beast takedowns. Whatever the case, it's still possible to like fight from a deficit, but I wouldn't say it's an advantage. So it is good to score first. I won my first tourney, rescored the matches, and worked on my obvious mistakes. That's honestly one of the best things you can do, is just watch your own footage, make sure to record everything, make sure to record your training. Even still, even though we're just training in here and it's me, Miha, and Tony training, and Emma occasionally as well, I go back and I watch the matches or I watch the rounds and just try and pick up little things, just use my brain a little bit to like look at a situation and see if I can garner any sort of improvement from it. That's important, and it's the only way to make like incremental progress beyond just learning new moves. Most people tend to just focus on like learning new moves. The culture of jiu-jitsu is like, oh, a certain move is going to help me, but the real power comes from being able to like look at something, identify a problem, and then find the proper technique for that problem, and then like insert that into your game, and now it's like you have that tool to work with. Hodger kind of used to fight in disadvantages, I think. Yeah, Hodger was a little bit of a slow starter back in the day as well, and he kind of just worked his way back. Once he got people on the ground, he just slowly dismantled them. I'm not at that same level, though. Hodger is pretty incredible. Shall we get started, though? It seems like most of the competition questions have waned now. So we'll start with Cosmo's question, because it can kind of transition into the rest of what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to move my phone over here. So Cosmo specifically asked, how do you score these advantages in passing scrambles or advantages in general? So what is an advantage? Well, an advantage is a representation of an almost. So it's like you almost did something. So what are those things? Well, it can almost be a takedown, can score an advantage. It can almost be a pass. That can score an advantage. It can almost be a sweep. That can score an advantage. It can almost be a submission. Did I say that already? That can almost be an advantage, or it can be advantage. It's an almost. It's an almost points or an almost submission. Okay? And what qualifies that? Well, this is one of the inherent problems in the system, is that it's up to the ref to decide if you scored or not. So the rule is 3 seconds. So you have to sweep the guy and hold them there for 3 seconds. And if he gets back on top or escapes the situation within 3 seconds, the ref will award you an advantage. And he just gets nothing. And it's just 1 advantage to 0 points. 0 points, 0 advantages for him, 0 points, 1 advantage for you. Now the problem with that is if I'm fighting really hard against someone, say I'm fighting against Miha. Miha is really good at fighting out from underneath you. Like if you took him down, he doesn't stop fighting until he stands up again. Or if you do pass, he doesn't stop fighting until he gets out. And that's the right mentality to have, because if the ref, like the problem is ref bias too. Like if the ref doesn't like you, or maybe he doesn't know you, but he recognizes the team of the other guy, he might subconsciously afford that guy a 3.5 second escape as an advantage rather than a 2.5 seconds. So if Miha escapes in 2.5 seconds as I pass, that's a fair advantage. But say I hold him for 3 seconds and then he escapes. In the rules, that should be my advantage, but in practice, refs kind of give it to one person or the other. It's like you could go back and watch the video and clearly see that 3 seconds passed, but then the ref still gives an advantage to the other guy. And that's just because they don't know the exact 3 seconds, because there's not a system to like keep track of those 3 seconds. And it could also be that they kind of just do it how they see it. And from their perspective at that moment, they thought it wasn't an actual advantage. So it's just difficulty as far as like what constitutes one and what doesn't. So Cosmo, your question is good because sometimes advantages aren't deserved and sometimes they are, and sometimes no one really knows. And it's tough to really like be set in stone if you're going to get the advantage in the competition setting. But in the rules, it states that if I get to a position that awards points and I maintain it for under 3 seconds, that should be an advantage. Okay, and there are some extenuating circumstances. So we can talk about all the different ones. Yeah, we can talk about all the different ones where you can score advantages. So let's start with the guard pass. So there's different guard passes that actually are good for scoring advantages, like throw by passes, for instance, are a really effective way to score advantages because it gets their legs out of the way. And what constitutes a guard pass advantage is me getting past his knee line. So when we talked about the up, down, left, right philosophy, we laid out the idea of the knee line and the X, Y, and Z axis. And if I can get past the knee line here, even if he's still pushing and defending and getting his legs in, if I'm past the knee line like for a second, even if it's just like half a second and then he recovers, technically that can be an advantage. You don't necessarily have to like get chest to chest, hold, and then he escapes under 3 seconds, and then that's an advantage for me. That would also be an advantage, but just like getting around his leg, like maybe if I like block here and like grab his head and we're like fighting aggressively, but then he throws his leg over, that should be an advantage for me if I'm past the legs, right? So the only time it wouldn't be an advantage by the rules is if like his knee is in here and I like am still almost past, but there's his legs constitute some sort of guard here still, and then he eventually recovers and I didn't pass, that would be an advantage, right? So if you're looking for passes that result in like a quick advantage, you need a pass that immediately puts his legs in a position where you can cross the knee line, right? The knee line is always changing depending on where his knees are, but if you can cross this knee line, that means you're in advantage scoring range. So a throw by pass, especially the one that I like to teach, which is like you go in and then up here, going in and then up, the leg immediately gets put out of position and his body's left in a situation where he has to completely switch his hips back towards me to defend. He has to do a full hip recovery movement. And because he has to move his hips from one side to the other so dynamically, it makes it very difficult for him to actually get something back in front of me as I close the distance, because his own leg is blocking his other leg from coming over the top and maybe going for like a cross step or something. And if I just drop my weight here, I don't even have to like do the pass properly. The pass properly would be like up, over, I drop, I grab the cross collar so that his other leg can't come across anyways. I work to get an underhook on this side and I would successfully pass. But if I know that Mihal's guard is so good that if I really commit to this, it's going to be such a battle that I feel like I'm going to gas myself out, I might do the pass differently. I might do the pass with the intention of only getting the advantage. So I would intentionally do the pass incorrectly to get past the knee line, but have a less chance of actually securing the position. And the way you would do that is just by fighting normally, doing the throw by pass, but instead of doing it properly, which would give him a better chance of actually escaping, but it would have a higher reward for me if I actually secure it, I'll just drop my shoulder on his stomach and just drop like this here. Because from this position, it's sloppy, but I got past the knee line, and now all I have to do is just show some sort of chest-to-chest contact as he tries to sit up and escape. If I just do something like this, face him, and then he recovers, I would have got the advantage. And it's like I know that my chances of securing that pass are slim and much less than if I did it properly. But if I do it properly, it takes a little more time, and it gives him a little bit more time to react properly, and there's an engagement happening there where if both people are the same level, it might be more beneficial to do the technique wrong, which is a weird thing to think about, but it happens. And the same thing happens with long steps. So a perfect long step will work, but a really bad long step will almost always secure an advantage, which is why it's really good to keep moving and stay aggressive. Recovering doesn't put you in a bad position. Worst case scenario is you start off back where you began, which is in his guard. So a proper long step pass would be me stepping into like a good knee cut position, maybe like a reverse del hiva position, waiting for the right opportunity to secure my grips on the collar, clearing the top foot off the hip, controlling the pants so I can set up my secondary pass option, which would be an X pass to the opposite side. Doing my long step with proper form, putting my head in the shoulder, putting my elbow to the mat, clearing my leg up out of the lock and long stepping, keeping my elbow tucked super tight so he can't turn into me to recover, blocking the inside hip so he can't bring this bottom knee in to recover, and as he tries, keeping him flat with my head and solidifying the position to actually pass. That is a very effective pass. But if I do it like that, and Miha recognizes that I'm trying to set up this pass, he can break this grip right away and not give me the proper grips. And so it's like I'm lost. I don't have my proper grip. How am I supposed to long step effectively? It would just be kind of a waste. So sometimes it's better to do something sloppy in a competitive setting to score. And so this is what the sloppy version would look like. It's like I know that to do a long step, I have to get past his legs and I have to throw my leg behind me. And there has to be some sort of control around his head. So I can literally just jump at his head, do a big long step and make it look dynamic, and it probably won't result in a perfect pass, but it's going to look like I tried, and in the IBJJF rule set, that it will be an advantage. So the rules themselves kind of encourage a little bit of like faking action, fakery, and you see that kind of be prominent throughout a lot of different positions. From within closed guard on top, you kind of have to like game it a little bit and look like you're doing something in some situations. So this would be a good example. So I'm here, maybe we're like trying to pass and I couldn't get my long step grip ever, so it's like, well, I can't get the grip, so I'm just gonna chuck my arm at his face like this, around the head, even if he puts up a perfect block, and I just do a big step. Did I have secure grips? Am I gonna be able to drive into him here and hold the position? Probably not. He's gonna immediately push away, and I'm just gonna keep driving. But if I did it convincingly enough, with enough effort behind it, it can look like an advantage. And a lot of times you'll get an advantage for that. So that's how you could do it from guard, or from passing, sorry. From guard, it's a little bit different. What are these usses for?
We didn't bow in.
Yes, we did. We did at the very beginning.
No.
We didn't?
No.
I thought we bowed in. Oh well. Tomorrow, we'll try again.
Good on them for like doing it themselves.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. I just got excited about the competition instruction. So now from guard, let's look at like scoring advantages from guard. What are you looking for? Well, it used to be that if someone hit their butt to the ground, it was an advantage for you. And so you could kind of game the system even more. And you could look for off balances that kind of look like a sweep, but then not actually follow it up. There's a lot of guard players who didn't feel confident on top, especially at the lower levels of jiu-jitsu from like blue to purple. Most grapplers tend to have like a focus on guard or top. And if they see an opportunity to win fights without leaving their guard position or their top position, it's going to encourage them to not come out of their prominent position, right? So if I'm a guard player, and I have been a guard player for a lot of my life before I started doing both more equally, I could win matches in competition just with the confidence that no one was going to pass my guard. So if I pulled guard effectively and no points were scored on me, and I was confident that I wasn't going to get my guard passed or passed close enough to get an advantage scored on me, which was pretty rare for me because my legs are so flexible and I had a good spider guard, I could win a match just by scoring an advantage from guard, and I never had to come on top ever. And the way I would do that is just using various spider guard sweeps where if I can create enough of an off balance to make him fall to his butt. So let's just say I do a simple like scissor type spider guard sweep where I'm here, and he's not going to fall to his butt necessarily, but I like tilt him over like this, and he hits his hip on the mat, and I like go like this with my hips for a second, but my intention is not to really come on top. It's to make him fight back against me, to make it look like I did something, and then when he comes up again, and I'm back to my guard, I score an advantage. So now I'm up an advantage, and it's up to him to pass my guard, but I'm so confident in my guard, I feel good here. And that's the story for a lot of people competing, is they feel comfortable in their guard, and when they're up on points, there's no pressure on me to do anything. As long as I just keep defending his guard passes and playing guard and like actively defending, he's not, like maybe he passes and wins, that's fine, but if he doesn't, I just win by default by scoring that advantage. And so the advantage rule set existed like that from guard for many years. And only in like, I think like 2013-ish, they changed it. I could be wrong on the exact date, but they changed it so that I can't just put him on his butt. So like say I sweep him with just like some sort of simple sweep, or I put him to his butt. This used to constitute an advantage. Like if he put it to his butt and I didn't even get up, if he quickly comes back up, I could get an advantage for that. But then it changed to the refs not giving those points unless you try to come up, and it's like I have to get my hips up. And so if your hips came off the ground and then he came right back up, I would still get an advantage. But now it's more that if I sweep him, I have to like be fully up in his guard. And if I get swept back immediately, it's going to be an advantage for me, but not otherwise. So you can't just off balance someone to get that advantage score. You have to actually sweep them fully, come up on top for less than 3 seconds to score the guard advantage. Does that make sense? Yeah, and so that kind of leads us to some of the other advantage positions, but there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's just forcing a turtle. If you can force someone to turtle, that's also an advantage. So you don't necessarily have to pass their guard, but if I literally just flip my opponent over, so if I'm here and I just actually just drive his weight up and over and like flip him over like this, and he comes back to guard, to play guard again, I get an advantage for that. Making your opponent turtle is technically an advantage. So you can make your opponent turtle in a lot of different ways, and we do this in no-gi a lot because someone turtling exposes their neck, and that's good. In the gi, you can kind of do the same thing by being aggressive with those sloppy guard passes I talked about. So for instance, the long step, say he's seated like this. I normally wouldn't do a long step from this position, but if I get an underhook at the same time, and I just kind of do like a really crappy long step to the left, I know it's not going to result in a chest-to-chest pass. But if he comes to his knees and I have front headlock, I just scored an advantage for making him turtle, and then I might have an opportunity to spin to the back, which isn't points for me. I just get the advantage for the original turtle, but now I'm attacking his turtle instead of his guard, and it's a lot easier to attack turtle than guard. But you're never really, like, how many of you have gone to a jiu-jitsu class in your life and the coach has said, today we're going to learn how to make someone turtle so we can get an advantage? It's not really like something that's commonly taught. But if you know that and you're in an equal match with another blue belt or purple belt and you can't pass their guard and they can't sweep you, maybe you can't pass, but if you can make them turtle, you just win. So like there's techniques that can just make you win in these scenarios where you're stuck against someone who's just as good as you. And if you just keep trying to engage in the pure jiu-jitsu on jiu-jitsu battle, nothing happens. So taking advantage of the points and the different situation that the competition provides, you can win like that. And so I used to develop all these ideas and strategies to beat the Meow Brothers because I knew it was very difficult to pass their guard. And when I was a purple belt is when I really started focusing on competition seriously. And I was thinking of different ways to like force a turtle. So, because if you can't pass some guy's guard, his guard is so good you can't pass, let's say, like the Meow Brothers. Well, you can't pass their guard, so you make him turtle. How do you make someone turtle? Well, one really good thing actually involved the lapel. So like, against, go ahead, what's that? No, you're on your back. Yeah, this is from a passing position. So, say I'm trying to pass, I can't pass. Yeah, Dan Lukart does talk about this stuff a lot. He's ahead of the curve on that. I mean, a lot of competitive gym coaches do this in their comp classes, but for most hobbyist classes, they don't teach this. It's only for like the comp class where you talk about this kind of stuff. So, against someone's guard, I can't pass. I can do my sloppy style of passing to try and create some advantage opportunities. Or I can go for double unders. Double unders are a great stalling position in competition. It's a great place to like chill for a second or wait for a second while you're winning, right? And this is just something you have to think about. This is how I won versus Marigali. I was kind of getting beat up at the beginning of that match, but I scored points and then I played the point system. I just did what I had to do to win, which was, and this is one of the techniques I used, is like getting to a double under position where I'm just like kind of holding on, like ready to not get swept. Because if I get to double unders, what are his options? It's loop choke me or somehow sweep me from a double under position, which is very hard to do. So I was thinking against Meows, I could get this far lapel, drive up a little bit, and then pass the lapel under their back to my other hand, like this. And then I could set their weight down and bring them this way. And now they're not just going to let me pass here, so they're going to try and turn into me and face me still. And I would lift, and I have the lapel, and I would just double up on the lapel and just do a big lift. that's a turtle, right? And I could do it pretty consistently in training. And luckily, well, not luckily, but in most of my matches with him, I never had to resort to a secret tactic like that, but I had it ready if I needed to. And in my final match where I lost against the Meows in an advantage battle was actually just the ref not giving me an advantage point where he normally would give me those advantage points in the previous 7 matches. So it was like the ref just did something different that day that wasn't in the rules that I was following to try and win. And that's not to take anything away from Paulo when he did beat me. It's just that like you cannot count on the points and the rules being followed by the referees all the time. Yeah, I say the Meows because I fought them both like 4 or 5 times each, and it's hard to identify who was who in each scenario. I do know, but I don't think it's necessary for you guys to know. They're just the Meows. So that's one option to force an advantage point. It's a technique specifically created to force an advantage point. You probably won't ever use it in a real or in a training situation in the gym because you'll just try and get your actual passes better. But it can still work. Like you can make someone turtle and take their back from the turtle. It's like fully functional. It's just not as used. Okay. I think the scenario, since we're talking about advantages, I think the scenario for the advantage that I lost in the match with Paulo was we just double guard pulled at one point, and I came up to get the advantage, and I just didn't get the advantage point. And I'm not sure what their reasoning was for it, what the ref's reasoning was for it. But every other time in my career versus them was like, whoever gets on top last will win. And that's just a rule, that's like a competitive rule that is seen over and over again at lower weight divisions. Is like, if both people double guard pull, or one person pulls guard effectively, and there's no points on the board, it's just 0-0, and you guys are in double guard pull, or one person is down and one person is up, but there's no points. The person who is on top at the end of that match will win. So like if it's 0-0 from the beginning of that match to the end, the guy on bottom probably is going to lose the referee decision, 0-0, because the other guy was on top the whole time, unless he's like really actively stalling. But if the guy on bottom sweeps, and now he's on top, he wins the fight by 2 points. And if it's a double guard pull, the person who ends on top will have an advantage lead, right? Even if it's a double guard pull and one person comes on top, I can just demonstrate this. If a double guard pull and some person comes on top, I'm winning by an advantage now. For the rest of the fight, the only way Mihawk can win is to score on me. So he has to like take my back, submit me, or sweep me back. And if he sweeps me back, which is the most common option, I'm on bottom. He has 2 points, and I have an advantage. So even though I came up first, doesn't guarantee me the win. So him coming up second is actually better for him because he gets a more valuable point for the same action. I only got an advantage for coming up, but he gets a full 2 points, which trumps my advantage. So now if I don't sweep back, he will win. If I just score a bunch of advantages, like almost sweeping him, but then not actually sweeping him, I still lose. I could have 20 advantages. If he has 2 points, he still wins. So I'd have to sweep back in some capacity. Now I'm up 2 points in advantage versus his 2 points. And now it's just a battle for who ends on top, unless someone can really secure the pass and win. And so when you go into the matches, you kind of have to think about that. Like, are we going to be able to pass each other's guards? Maybe not. And if that's the case, if you don't think you can pass this person's guard and you don't think they can pass your guard or take your back and it's just a fair fight, that's the situation you're getting into. That's what jiu-jitsu's been reduced to in a fair match, is just who can end on top, which is a fine goal, you know. A lot of grappling competitions have weird goals to get to, like pins or out of bounds or different things. In jiu-jitsu, it's like you're rewarded for being on top. And it's kind of weird because guard is such a big thing in jiu-jitsu. You have to be able to be comfortable coming on top. But then you see everyone who's like so focused on just guard that they don't want to come on top, but they have to because the rules say they have to, about like this situation here. So they pick situations where they can come on top, but it doesn't progress the actual match. So it's like they pick 50-50. It's like, oh, well, I know if I get 50-50, I 100% can sweep, and then maybe I can like not get swept back from the 50-50, and then that's the whole fight, is like a seesaw match of 50-50, and that happens all the time. Like at all weight divisions, is like resorting to 50-50 to sweep. he has you in 50-50 and can sweep back, but you're just betting that your 50-50 sweep was a little better than his, and you try and win like that. And that's some people's entire games, like, not entire, but like one person who's very good at that is Ponza. Luis Ponza would always go to 50-50, sweep, and just win by 2 points because people couldn't sweep him back from 50-50, and he was comfortable there, okay? And I don't, like, there's nothing wrong with that because those are the rules. At a certain point, everyone has to use that rule to win because it's built into the fundamentals of IBJJF rule sets. So you got to think about it like that. And some of the tricks you can do to take advantage of that is just like the beginning of a match. Like the beginning of a match, pulling guard effectively or not letting your opponent pull guard safely is a very powerful thing. And it's because of that strange dynamic of who usually in a fair match, whoever is on top wins. You have to go into every hard match thinking like that kind of. And it takes away from a lot of the technical aspects of jiu-jitsu because it's more of like a positional thing. And you have to pick techniques that ensure that you're going to be on top at the end, like 50-50. So a lot of times the rules actually encourage like slower grappling. But the alternative is bad too. Like not having advantages creates a lot of stalling defensively, where it's like the person who's losing stalls, which is even worse than the guy who's winning stalling, which is what IBJJF pushes. But like submission only pushes the guy who's losing to stall because it's more beneficial to stall as the loser. I'm pointing at Miha like he's the loser here, but I'm just that's not what my intention. But like in a sub-only situation, the guy who's getting beat up in the sub-only situation will stall, usually flat on his back in side control with arms up by the neck, rather than try and continue fighting. So which would you rather have? Well, having competed in both, I actually prefer the IBJJF system, and I haven't really seen a good replacement for it. So it's just something we have to deal with. It's like it's not perfect, no, but it's what we have to deal with. Okay. So the only other thing about advantages, and I went pretty deep into this. We already been here an hour, but we can go over this. We can go over the rest of the stuff that I had planned another day potentially. But one of the things about submissions is some submissions don't constitute an advantage. So like you can have a fully locked triangle, but if they are not threatened by it, like they haven't been choked by it at some point during the submission, you don't get an advantage. Another example of this is omoplatas. If you put someone in an omoplata and their shoulder isn't actually hurting, like it's not in pain, or you're like not submitting them with it and then they escape, you don't get an advantage. So that creates a weird thing because like fast triangles and fast omoplatas are everywhere in grappling, especially in competitions. But if I can't rely on an omoplata to give me the advantage, I can't think about it like it's a submission. So like omoplatas and triangles specifically in competition hold less value than other submissions because you put someone in an omoplata or a triangle, and if it's not fully locked up, like to the point, like those submissions, when they're fully locked up, the guy's tapping. There's very little chance of him to actually escape. But putting the person in the initial lock doesn't constitute an advantage by the refs most of the time. So if I'm like losing by let's say it's a tied fight right now, and my only way to win is to get an omoplata or get an advantage for a submission, and the only submission that I do, or maybe I'm just good at omoplatas, I throw my omoplata on, this full lock will not be an advantage. Like he's going to be defending, trying to posture up or whatever, and I'm trying to set up my position, and I've got to spend like 20 or 30 seconds fighting to it has to be the traditional omoplata finish. So I have to like sit up, get to around his hip, and start breaking his posture down. Like from here, when I start leaning forward in the rules, this should be an advantage, right? Like I should get an advantage here, like as I sit up. And then if he escapes, I get the advantage. But if I just throw the omoplata on like this, and he postures up and gets his arm out and just pulls his arm out, I don't get the advantage. Why? Well, it's tricky because say you're fighting someone and you're the one who's getting put in an omoplata, you have to think about how to defend the submission properly without letting it look like they did the submission properly to you, right? So it's a weird thing that applies with ankle locks too. So like they made a rule where if someone has you in an ankle lock, he doesn't get the advantage until I make a move to defend it. So if I ignore the ankle lock and don't do anything, like I just look at him and I just don't do anything, even if it hurts like hell, And he makes all sorts of faces trying to make it look like he's really about to break my leg. And it might be about to break my leg, but if I don't react, technically, you're not supposed to get an advantage. He's not supposed to get an advantage here if I don't make an attempt to defend. But now, look at this. So if I do nothing, he doesn't get an advantage. If I go like this to defend, he gets an advantage. But if I come up, so I come up just like this, would you classify that as a defense? Is this a defense? It stopped his ankle lock. Coming up is one of the best things you can do to stop an ankle lock. Well, in the IBJJF rule format, this sometimes constitutes a defense and sometimes doesn't. Who's it up to? The ref. It's just up to him. If he wants to say that's a defense, he can give you an advantage. He can give Miha an advantage. Or if he doesn't want to, he can say that's no advantage. But no matter what, I don't get my 2 points until I clear my foot out of the submission. So if he gets the advantage here, that means the ref is now acknowledging this ankle lock as a submission. So it is now a submission. That means that I won't get my 2 points until I escape the ankle lock. But if he doesn't acknowledge it as a submission, I get my 2 points right away. So how that makes sense, I don't know. So there definitely needs to be some rewriting of some of these rules. There's also some weird, like, convoluted words in the rules where, like, if the time is running out and someone has you in a foot lock here, like it could be an advantage because time ran out. Or in other situations, it says, like, if you're in a submission in other positions, like a non-ankle lock position, it's backwards and it's like it doesn't constitute one or it doesn't constitute an advantage. It's weird. And so I know the rules pretty well. Like, I read all of the rule updates. I've been doing this a long time. And it seems like they intentionally make the rules, like, kind of abstract to give referees the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think they did that intentionally. I think they did that so that they don't have to argue with people. Like, because if the rules are very clear and a ref makes a mistake, you can be like, look, the rules are very clear, you made a mistake, and then it's like they have to redo the match, and so what are they going to do? So if they make the rules really abstract and where it's like up to the ref, then they don't ever have to deal with, like, people in the audience getting pissed off or even the athletes getting pissed off because there's just no way you can argue it. It's like, well, in the rule book it says it's up to me. It's like, well, fuck, what can I do?
Someone mentioned the interesting position, top half guard smash.
Yeah.
Kind of arbitrary as well, right?
They took that out recently. So, like, so now top half guard smash is not an advantage anymore, but it used to be, which is like, I think it could be good. I think it encourages passing rather than turtling, because I mean, a lot of times people won't even try and fully pass. They just try and create the scramble, which gives the advantage, which is good. I mean, it creates high-paced movement, but, like, why not reward pressure? Like, now pressure passing has been nerfed basically by IBJJF, and they made pressure passing a weaker way to pass because you don't get the same benefits they used to get for it. So if you're a pressure passer and you like to pass with smash half, maybe it's not worth it to go all the way to smash half because you're not even going to get the advantage there. So it's kind of a weird thing. So when the rules change, like, this is why I talk about the meta of actual techniques and, like, how effective they are, because little things change. Like, one little thing changes like that, and it makes a big difference in the overall game. But most people, like, a lot of people don't look at it like that. So, like, a small rule change, like not awarding an advantage for a smash half position, makes people think differently about how they're going to win, because now you have to think about that. And if you're not thinking about that and you're not looking at it in this granular detail, you're probably not going to win very often, because you need to know these rules and you need to know these positions that are going to be presented to you in these matches. So, like, if you guys didn't know that rule and you go to a competition and you go smash half and you think you won, well, maybe they changed the rule a month ago and they didn't tell anyone because they just posted a little thing about it on their website somewhere and no one saw it. It's like, what can you do? You have to be, like, super focused on what's changing, which is why you have me, because I focus on it and I know this stuff. Most of the time I know it. Sometimes I fall behind. But I always do a little update to make sure I'm clear on the rules before I go compete again. Oh, this is a good question. Lapel players, what about if someone puts you in a toe hold and intentionally tries to make you go out of bounds? Have you seen people get DQ'd for that? So that's another weird thing, where it's like, if you if you are in a submission and you intentionally go out of bounds, you get DQ'd. But if I put Miha in a submission and I intentionally go out of bounds, it's 2 points for me. So like I can put you in a submission and like drag you out of bounds as long as it looks like I'm still going for the submission, and I can get 2 points. So toe holds, you don't really see that. Like where I've trained all over the place, and when I train with good black belts at their gyms, no one goes for toe holds on me, because toe holds rarely tap good black belts. Like when good black belts are training with each other, the toe hold is like one of the last things you get tapped with. It's a good move, but like good black belts will defend it pretty effectively. It's easier to defend than it is to apply. But in a bordered setting where there's borders that if I go past them, I get 2 points, well, if that existed in the gym, black belts would be going for them all the time, because you can win the round by going for a crappy toe hold, knowing it's not going to submit your opponent, but it has good leverage to make someone roll a bunch. So when they roll a bunch, you get 2 points. It's like, why not go for it? So you see a lot more toe holds in competition than you do in actual jiu-jitsu practices at the good gyms. And that's directly a result of the rules. So I think most people wouldn't even care about toe holds as much in the gi, because it's hard to tap people with them. Like Cobrinha won Worlds one time just by not tapping to a toe hold. Like the guy went for a toe hold on him. It wasn't out of bounds. It was just in the center. He tried to go for a traditional toe hold, just like staying still, and it just popped Cobrinha's foot a bunch of times, and Cobrinha didn't tap, and he won. And that's the thing about toe holds is, and ankle locks really, leg locks in general. If someone just doesn't want to tap, and you're not prepared to really permanently wreck their foot, you can lose because of it. So it's like it's a very high risk maneuver for the person attacking. But there is a time and place to score points with it, which is like, it's the same thing as the advantages. It's like it doesn't really serve a place in jiu-jitsu if you're looking at the main goal being trying to win positionally to get the submission. Like that's what jiu-jitsu is all about. When you're in the training room, you keep rolling until someone gets submitted or the time runs out, but you're both looking for the submission, right? Most of the time. But in competition, the rules change, and now it's not jiu-jitsu necessarily. It's like, who can look for the submission? Yes, but if the submission's not available, the secondary goal is to look for toe holds to go out of bounds, advantages from near passes, resetting with grips. So like if we go out of bounds, which happens 5 or 6 times per 10-minute black belt match, every time you reset, you have to get your grips back. And 95% of the people I roll with or compete against, when we go to reset, they try and like sneak their hand up a little tighter on the grip that they had. They try and get it a little closer. So now you got to think about that. So maybe you try and go for a toe hold rolling out of bounds, which is like you would never do in training. You both go out of bounds. The ref resets you, and you have to like make note of what grips you had. And then when you come back to the middle, you're both thinking about how you can get better grips as the ref resets you. All the while, you're not allowed to talk to the ref. So if Miha's trying to make an illegal grip on me or a grip he didn't have, I can't talk to the ref. So I'm not allowed to look at the ref. So I have to like somehow communicate that this is an illegal grip. And the way you do that is like, say Miha didn't have a really tight lasso grip. So like he was here and he's trying to get the lasso grip back, and I'm like, I have to like not say anything, but I have to like just not do it. So you're coming back to the middle of the match, like having this grip fight while the ref is like, what are you guys doing? Put the grips back. And you're just like, and that's a real part of jiu-jitsu that you don't really see or talk about. And then it kind of comes down to like the athletes yelling at each other until the athletes come to a conclusion of what grips were had, because neither of them is allowed to talk to the ref. Because if at any point I say, hey, he didn't have this grip, I just showed you it over there, the rest is like, penalty. So communication is discouraged. Yeah, I think there just needs to be a clear out of bounds thing. That's one of the issues, and it's difficult to teach jiu-jitsu rules like I'm teaching you guys now, because I'm not teaching you the rules. I'm teaching you the strategy to make the best of what you can with what the rules are. Because if I teach you the rules, it's not going to make sense, because they don't make sense.
I think we should just have walls, like just fight.
Yeah.
Squash.
No.
Sport.
Yeah, that would be good. Or just in cages or something. I like having walls in the gym. I like training against the walls. There's a lot of technique you can do there, and it would eliminate a ton of these out of bounds reset problems. Like maybe, and that's another thing, it gives a lot of power to the refs.
Maybe light featherweights would actually have to fight.
Yeah, because they get to the wall, and it's like you can't double guard pull against the wall necessarily. And using a wall, like if you're passing whether someone's head is against the wall, Your passing is a lot stronger. So there'd be more incentive to come on top because
Harder to take the back as well.
yeah. And there was one other thing I wanted to say, but I forgot. Why does it seem so many high-level competitors are so willing to trade 50 sweeps several times a match? Well, I kind of explained it earlier with the advantages, and it's really just because one of the fundamental rules of jiu-jitsu is like if you both acknowledge that you're not going to be able to score like good position on each other, and that's not like a verbal acknowledgement. It's just like once you get in the match and you're rolling with the guy, you know it's like there's a risk versus reward. Like if I try really hard to pass this guy's guard and I know he's really good, I'm going to get tired. I'm going to get more tired than him. So it's risky to do that. So a lot of times people kind of like clam up and are just like, well, as long as I'm on top at the end of this match, I'll win. So I'm on bottom right now, but I don't want to try that hard, so I'm just going to look for 50-50, and I'm going to try and get out. I'm going to try and be on top at the end of this match. And that's their strategy. And it's a lame strategy, but the rules kind of allow it to happen. And you can get really good at that strategy and win a lot of matches, even if the person you're fighting is better than you. So if I train with someone who's never done 50-50, or I fight someone who's never done 50-50, and they're not competent in it, but maybe they're way better than me everywhere else, like standing, guard passing, even playing guard. If I put them in 50-50 and just hold them there, we can sweep back and forth. There's no stalling penalty for that, really, as long as you're sweeping back and forth. And you can just hold someone there and lock them down and then try and win in this little mini game that the rules have created.
I see someone there's discouraged, was thinking about competing, thought he or she knew the rules, and now is kind of not certain if still wants to compete. But it's kind of, the rules are weird for both people, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a high chance you still get a lot of benefit from competing.
Yeah, it's still good to go because it is fair game. Like most of the time, there's not going to be a bias against you specifically. It happens at higher levels probably, but in like just normal competitions, normal IBJJF opens, both people are at a disadvantage of not knowing the rules very effectively. Easton made a good point. He said clear rules with video review and coach challenge, like in freestyle wrestling, would be cool. And I think that's true because there's a lot of situations where you should be able to challenge a call and review it on video to see the time. Was the 3 seconds fully passed or not? And it's like if it's 0.01 millisecond over 3 seconds, that should be 3 points. And if it's 0.01 second under 3 seconds, at 2 seconds and 99 milliseconds, that's not 3 points, or that's not the pass points. But that 1 millisecond change is decided by a referee, often with the actual margin for error being seconds and not milliseconds. So there's just a human error in there that is really difficult. That allotment of human error creates a cascade of problems.
Yeah, you could make an argument that more and more is at stake in those high-level competitions, so it should be more and more important that the right calls are are awarded properly.
Yeah, and because of and this has kind of turned into just me pointing out a lot of the problems, but there are a lot of problems in the system. Another thing is like reap DQs. So like reaping is a big issue, and it was such a big issue that like in the rules it said if at any point your leg crossed the hip line, go ahead and come on top here. If my toes are here and if at any point my toes like crosses rib line like this can be a DQ. And they were DQing people just left and right. Every competition you were going to, half your friends got DQ'd for reaping because the guy just like pushed your foot across a little bit. Like he tried to like do something like this and it's like now you're reaping. And you would get DQ'd. And then, so they're like, okay, that's obviously a problem. Let's make it so now when someone reaps, instead of an instant DQ, you stop, reset, take their foot out and give them a penalty. But you know what happened? They changed that rule and then none of the refs followed it. And everyone just kept DQing everyone, even though they had changed the rules. And that happened to me like 5 times. It's like, okay, in the rules it says you can reap, it's just a penalty. It's like grabbing inside the pants accidentally or something. But then when you actually did it, refs were still DQing you. And when I would be like, hey, it's in the rules, that's not a DQ, they would be like, oh, sorry, match is over. We're not allowed to go back and like look at it. It's like, what? That's insane. That doesn't make any sense. So that's why I'm kind of bitter about the rules, because the refs a lot of times don't follow the new rules. I thought it's only a DQ if you're holding the foot as well. The rules now are much more lenient. Like, you don't see people getting DQ'd for reaps nearly as often. But a couple years ago, that was not the case. If your foot even looked like it was crossing the hip, it was like, you're getting DQ'd. It was like not even worth going for footlocks at all, because any footlock you went for, if you cross your feet to control their hips in some way, and it just goes 1 inch to the left or the right, you get DQ'd for it. I got DQ'd against Tarsus Humphreys for going for a toe hold. And like, the whole point of a reap is like to not let their knee bend in, right? Or like bend like this or something, like have your heel turned out. But a toe hold directly does that. Like, a toe hold bends your knee in this direction. It's literally bending your knee in the reaping direction. So I did a toe hold, but at no point did I like actually reap. I just did a toe hold, and we rolled, and because we were in like this position, which is just a toe hold position, it's just a toe hold. This is how you finish a toe hold. I got DQ'd for that in transition, so we didn't even stop there. It was like we rolled through that position, and the ref saw for a second, like, aha, that's a reaping movement. They DQ'd me.
I think refs are just excited about the chance to DQ people. They get to do this cool
Yeah.
X thing.
That's the problem, is there's way too much power in the refs' hands. The refs should be like only there to award points that are based on the rules and keep order.
ADCC has it like that, right? The table awards the points.
Right.
Like 3 people.
Yeah, the ref in the center is just controlling the match and then like signaling if they see something. But IBJJF, they run such a large operation, so many people on the mat, so many competitors. It's just not realistic for them to have like 5 people. Well, it is. They could easily do it, but they choose not to. They could easily put, a table and like stick stuff, do stuff properly, but it's just not economical to their business model, I guess.
One of the funniest instances of this, like, heel hook DQ was when I was in Ireland. I was refereeing a match at, like, there was a couple of blue belts fighting. This guy won a couple of matches by like straight up bullying people, and then he got a match against a guy that was beating him, and I could see in his eyes like looking for a way out. He didn't know what else to do. This guy was smashing him, and then he got to guard, and I could see him like just for a second think about it, and then he went for a full-blown heel hook, like full on. I DQ'd him, and then that was his chance to get a way out of the match without losing.
Right.
He DQ'd himself, basically.
Yeah. That happens too. I've seen that happen. And a lot of, that was an issue for me too with DQs a lot, is like I was playing guards that people hadn't seen before, and they didn't know what to do. So instead of like trying to deal with it, they just changed the strategy entirely to just try and make it look like I'm reaping. Like I got DQ'd in 2014 Worlds. Like, I had done the absolute, I had just beaten Leandro Lowe and like a bunch of good guys throughout the absolute, and then I lost to Bushesha. And then I went to my division, and like second round of my division, I fought this guy. His name is Diego Gamanal. He's a total bitch, dude. This guy, like, I can't believe he did this. He like legitimately pushed my foot across and then like yelped and like fell to the ground like I had hurt him. It was so obvious that I did not. He knows it, I know it. If I ever saw him, we could have a conversation about it, and it would be very clear that he did it intentionally. It's like, why is that allowed? Like, how can that be allowed to exist? That if someone can intentionally try and get you DQ'd and then celebrate about it. Like, come on, are you fucking kidding me? You're gonna intentionally get someone DQ'd over an exploit in the faulty rule system and then celebrate about it? Congratulations on cheating. Like, good job. That actually happened to me, and I wasn't allowed to argue with it because the match is over. There's just you're not allowed to like make a case for yourself.
So join us next week for the next bitching about the rules live stream.
Yeah, next time we'll go over like the actual. Well, basically what I'm going to show you is how to take advantage of the rules. That's what it is. That's the situation that's been created because of the abstraction of the rules. Is that abstraction that gives refs power? It also gives athletes power at the cost of the viewer. So like at the cost of the person who wants to watch jiu-jitsu, the athletes can regain a little bit of power in the realm where they're supposed to have power. So it's techniques to take advantage of an abstraction that the refs take advantage of. And there are a lot of techniques and strategies. Is it jiu-jitsu? I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say it's it's an artificial construct of jiu-jitsu for sure, but in a natural grappling environment where you don't put a bunch of weird rules to give refs power, it wouldn't result in those being effective movements, but because of it, they are. We'll take a few more questions because this just turned into a podcast today. Do you think that a person screaming with the referee will have any influence on the scoring? Absolutely. And that's something that I wouldn't even think about for a long time because like when I trained at Lloyd Irvin's, Lloyd Irvin always made a big deal about that. Like you have to kind of fight the refs too, and you need to have someone who can like fight the refs. But when I went to Autos, I didn't always have a coach or someone there to like help me with stuff. I would travel a lot and compete alone all the time. And I just was like, it's on me. I got to just win it, you know? It's not up to me. But when I came to, when we started Legion, and I started having to think about like coaching other people and like coaching other high-level athletes that were going to start coming and train with us, that is something to think about, because if you can influence a ref, you have influence over the match because the ref has influence over the match. So if you're intimidating enough and you have a big enough jiu-jitsu name or a team and there's like actual real consequences to like pissing this person off, like Andre or like some of the other team heads or leaders, the refs will bend to their demands. Like because you can look at the points, and that's not to say that their demands are false, because the guys who are making these calls from the side, the coaches, are basing it off the point system, off what the refs, or the rule system that the refs are supposed to follow. So if the ref takes his bias leniency, where he is allowed to like decide whether someone wins or loses in some of these situations, and then you have a coach who's like well-known, reputable, like Andre, like being like, what are you doing? You're obviously being biased right now. These are the points, blah, blah, blah. The ref might be like, oh, yeah, I guess I can't take advantage of this time. All right, yeah, wave it back. Like I made the decision, but because that guy yelled at me, I'm going to take it back. It's like, that's an issue. That it's like, wait, 2 seconds ago you just said that was a different point system or a different point result, but someone else changed it. So I think it's very good that coaches can do that, but I also think it's bad because like you have an advantage if your coach speaks Portuguese. So like if your coach speaks fluent Portuguese, all of the refs at IBJJF are Portuguese or are speaking Portuguese. I'm sure most of them speak English too, obviously. But it does help to have that like fluency in Portuguese, and that's a bias that shouldn't be allowed in international competition, in my opinion. And I mean, most other sporting events don't allow for all of the refs to be from one geographical location. It's more spread out. I think ADCC, they almost are all from Finland. But it's almost like a neutral third party because there's not that many grapplers from Finland. I mean, there are a lot.
Russian guys fight Finnish guys.
Yeah, there's a lot now actually. Yeah, I mean, that's still a problem. But I think that's something that ADCC did that intentionally in the past to like try and eliminate the American-Brazilian bias. I think they would be the first ones that if they saw it becoming a problem in ADCC, they would add more refs from different locations.
Like I wrote, I hate Brazilians and I'm one.
No, I mean, any culture is going to do this. Any culture that has the control of the institution, there's going to be bias there. It has nothing to do with Brazilian or otherwise. It's just like it's an operation that's run mostly by people who speak Portuguese. And so if you speak Portuguese, that helps to communicate with the people who run the organization. And so it's a disadvantage to everyone else. Of course, it doesn't ultimately it doesn't really matter. Like plenty of Americans win, right? Mikey wins all the time. Jamil, like everyone wins. They win. You can still find ways to win, obviously, but it's something that I think it does affect a lot of people who aren't for the people who aren't so good that they can just win 100% of the time by submitting people. Where like submission is the only way to not leave it in the ref's hands, really, or win by like such an absurd amount of points. But it's difficult to like be that head and shoulders above someone else. Yeah, so someone, a good friend of mine was recommending, like, when I start going to coach stuff, to have, like, a secondary coach. Like, having a good friend who's, like, down with what we do and, like, have him coach for us. Like, someone, I don't know, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus because apparently maybe being associated with us is bad, but, like, a guy like Homolo, who's, like, a really great coach. He's respected. He's, like, really open-minded about the American Jiu-Jitsu thing that I've been pushing, and maybe he would help or something. I don't want to like put him on the spot, but something like that would be beneficial to have. What is the next evolution to BJJ? How can it become more about the sport and less about gaming the rules? Well, I would say most of the matches don't result in a gaming of the rules. It has some effect on all matches to a lesser extent. Some matches are completely decided by a gaming of the rules, and some matches are completely decided by the ref allocation of error. Some refs are decided, or some matches are decided completely with just pure jiu-jitsu, passing, submitting, taking the back. So it's like you have three options. The only thing I can think is like to really have a team of people analyze the rules and like come to some sort of like round table discussion of what can improve it and then test the new things. But that's not how the IBJJF business works. Like what they have now is working for them, so why would they change it? The only people who would benefit is like the really high, like it only benefits the high level grapplers to change the rules. Like it just benefits the guys who make their money from competing and they want to have as much control as possible over their win or loss and want it to be 100%. Like I want it to be my fault that I lost and my fault that I won, and everything should just be like, if I'm on the one fighting on the mat, I should control the fight as equal as the other guy across from me. It's not bad to be associated with me. I'm just like American Jiu-Jitsu, like saying American Jiu-Jitsu pisses off some people. They think it should be called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu all the time, no matter who does it. It should be called. Some people think that. So it's a small but vocal subsection of our community. Yeah, anytime you have rules, there's going to be an exploitation of the rules. Currently, because it's so lenient in jiu-jitsu, it's like you can get away with a lot more as far as being the competitor and being the ref. Both people can get away with a lot. You can get away with a lot of cheating as a competitor too. There's a lot of ways to cheat without people even noticing. No, I didn't get to train in the gi with them. Only a few years ago when they were training the gi more. Ian donated $5 and said, last year at Pans, a ref stopped my match to ask me if I deserved 2 points for a 50-50 sit-up. Advantage at most, which he didn't give to me, so why ask? That's weird.
What?
Yeah. I think here's one of the vocal subsects of jiu-jitsu. I think you're salty. Brazilians became famous for it, and especially the Gracies, and you wanted to be the Cornelius for who are the real masters. You must be joking. You're probably just trolling, because that doesn't make any sense. Let's say you're up by 2 points and you cannot get swept. At which point of the match do you decide to go from the offensive top position to the defensive top position? Yeah, usually, well, you got to kind of figure out, well, how you have to put into the equation the stalling calls. So every 20 seconds you can get a penalty. So the second you stop doing something, the ref is supposed to look at his watch and start counting down from 20 seconds. And once it gets to 20, he's supposed to give a penalty. And then if you continue to not doing anything, he looks for another 20 seconds. And then after that, 20 seconds has passed, so that's 40 seconds of not doing anything. He gives you a penalty and then gives the other guy an advantage. So then he goes back to looking at his watch. You can still not be doing anything. So now almost a minute has passed. And at the 59-second mark, technically, you could start moving again and not get the third penalty. So the third would be a penalty and then 2 points for the guy not stalling. So you have 60 seconds of time, or 59 seconds of time before you actually get scored against, right, for not doing anything. So usually around the 1 minute mark is the time to stall. So like just under 1 minute, if the ref is following the rules and counting down by the clock, you then have 59 seconds to only get scored 2 advantages against. So if you're up 3 advantages and there's 1 minute left, you can technically hardcore stall for 59 seconds and still win that fight. And playing that line, it's a risky line to play because the refs don't always keep accurate timekeeping on their watches for these stalling calls. But you could do nothing for 59 seconds and win with a 3 advantage lead. But also to reset the stalling timer, all you have to do is just attempt to pass, and then it's supposed to reset back to the original stalling call, I believe.
Here's a decent question.
We have a question from a Keenan Online member, and he says, I'm new to jiu-jitsu. When is the right time to join competition for students who just started training? I would give it a couple months at least. 3 months, 3 to 4 months probably would be a good foundation before you start going into white belt competitions and getting a feel for it. Just don't expect to win, because at white belt you could be fighting a guy who's a wrestler. Maybe he's trained for a long time, but he's been inconsistent, so he never got his blue belt. There's a lot. The white belt range of skill is pretty vast. So you could be you could train for 4 or 5 months and still get your ass kicked at a lot of white belt tournaments, or you could train for 4 or 5 months and then slaughter everyone at white belt tournaments. So just don't expect one thing or the other, and just go into it knowing that you're going to learn from it, and you're going to learn a lot about the stuff that I've illustrated today, the things that are not necessarily technique focused, but are more like strategic, or like a concept or an idea based around the stuff I talked about today, the strategy. Do you think it's interesting, a golden score rule in jiu-jitsu? Is that something where it's like, if it's a tie at the end of they do an overtime round and the first person to score wins? What's a dirty competition move that you've gotten away with or someone has done to you? Well, one is like using the back of the gi here. If someone's about to pass your guard and you stick your foot in this, like your heel or your toe, it's almost impossible to pass someone's guard when someone does that. So like, if you're about to get your guard passed, or like you're getting in a really bad spot and you slip your toe into this somehow and kick them off of you, I've done that before. And technically it should be a penalty. But a lot of times you can do it so fast that no one notices. But you have to be very aware of the situation, because it's like you're about to get passed and you see maybe you see a glimpse of his gi, and you get your foot in there and you shove him off you. It's not easy to do, but it's technically illegal. But not like DQ illegal, just a penalty. Same thing, like you're not allowed to grab inside their pants, but I was fighting Mateus Dinez one time, and he almost passed my guard, and he had like a really strong grip on my pants, and he was doing a long step pass, and I couldn't break the grip, and I was about to get passed, and I couldn't break it, but I saw the grip was on my pants as he long stepped me, and I just reached and I grabbed inside his sleeve. I just grabbed inside his sleeve to get it like a strong enough grip to break his pants grip, and I broke the pants grip. Technically, it was an illegal grip. I would have got a penalty for it if the ref saw, but the ref didn't see. I still would have won. Like, that wasn't enough. Like, if I got a penalty, it wouldn't have made the difference of the match. But if I hadn't done that, I probably would have got my guard passed, and I could have lost. So am I going to take a penalty for 3 points? Yeah, because it's a penalty. It's not like a highly illegal move. Do you ever have negative thoughts mid-match, too tired, you want to quit? Yeah, that's a real thing. And I think that kind of stuff really comes down to how you train and the mentality you put yourself in training, and making sure to push yourself to the limit in training. Really try and push your cardio. Put yourself in bad positions that you have to fight hard to get out of. Like, you really have to test yourself in training and really see the envelope, how far you can push the envelope. Do you use hypnosis at all? No. But I think that would be a good strategy if you could hypnotize someone while you're rolling with them. Maybe there's a way. What criteria do refs tend to use for refs decision? Well, they don't. I can tell you one thing. It's definitely not a real system that these refs are using. They're not like going back to a piece of paper and like writing down, well, he did more of this move, and he did more of this move, and he controlled the mat in this way. Let's like tally up the points like they do in MMA. It's more just like, I think this guy won. That's what they do. The rule about having to wear both belts, yeah, that's an unnecessary rule too. You could just say that if you're on this side of the bracket, you must wear a blue gi. That would be a lot better. Like all matches should have a white and blue gi. And if you don't have your blue gi with you, that's your fault. That's better than having to wear the second belt, because the second belt is an advantage. It's an advantage and a disadvantage, because like it's harder for me to get someone's lapel out of a double belt than it is out of one belt. But then someone who plays belt guard, now he's got two belts to play with, and it like has easier grips on those belts. So it's an advantage for some people, disadvantage for others, but just changing the colors of the gi would be the best way. Do you think it's immoral to use steroids when everyone else is using them? Immoral? Yeah, I guess it just depends on what you think of as immoral. Is it the law? Is something that's illegal immoral? Or is knowing that you might fight a small amount of people who aren't on steroids, does it make you feel bad? Do you feel bad about it? I don't know. I never really wanted to do steroids just for personal health reasons. I just wasn't convinced that you're not going to get really fucked up by it. I'm not convinced. I'm not willing to sacrifice any part of my health, really, for more competitive success. Would you make that determination based on the rule set of the organization you're competing in? I mean, the main organizations, like USADA is somewhat involved in IBJF, so you could follow their rules. You could, I mean, ADCC, it's like no one cares. A lot of people juice for that. Isn't high-level competition inherently sacrificing some of your health? Not really. It's good to train hard. As long as you don't overtrain, it's healthy for you to push yourself and train hard. I feel great when I train, like when I do a hard training camp. I'm not gonna like push myself super hard to the point it's gonna damage my body. The least favorite part of competition day, yeah, just waiting. It'd be so nice if you just wake up and you just go fight and that's the end of it, and then you're just free for the rest of the day. I wish that's how it was. Having to wait around for 6 to 8 hours, fighting once, and having to wait an hour to fight again. If you could just get it all done in one place, like jiu-jitsu training is. Can you imagine if to train jiu-jitsu you had to wake up early, wait around for 8 hours, then you get to do one round, then you got to wait another 2 hours to do the next round, and then you do another round 10 minutes from then. And then another one an hour later. It's like such a mess.
Plus, you have to hook yourself up to a tank that only has the most disgusting air, so you get used to the smell of the arena.
Right. But even super fight events are not very fun, because then it's like you wait 9 hours, you have one match, and then it's over. It's like, I like bracketed events when all the matches happen in a short amount of time.
The way I get over that is just, I imagine some soldier somewhere like waiting for months for dudes to come over the horizon, you know, just thinking.
That was my first like attempt at meditation, is just learning how to just sit for 9 hours, like at tournaments. I would go to these IBJF tournaments and I'd just be sitting on concrete for hours and hours and hours. And I don't like looking at my phone when I'm about to compete, because there's so much going on and it's so easy to get caught up in what's on your phone that you lose focus on the situation. So I just sit and I just be with my eyes closed, and usually I just end up sleeping. But if I felt like if I could relax enough to fall asleep, that was like a good goal. Like I'm chill enough to sleep. That means I'm pretty comfortable right now. That's a good goal. So that's what I started reaching for, is like when I had to wait around a lot, I would try and sleep at competitions as my meditative goal. When do you know that you're reaching your limit and not overextending or overtraining. That's a tough one because when you haven't really fully overtrained, you don't really know what it's like, because you can feel really crappy some days, and you're actually fine, and it's just mental or emotional. The only way to really find your limit is to really push yourself and force yourself to that limit, to the point that you get like sick or injured. Like if you're consistently getting sick or injured from training too hard, that's like a good threshold. You're like, well, I know if I train this hard, I usually get sick or injured, so I should tone it down a little bit. So like keeping track, like if you can't keep track in your own head, write it down, keep track of your training. Colin says, I popped my knee in a competition and it made noise. The ref wanted to DQ me, but the opponent said, let's continue, and the ref allowed it, but made us start from standing, even though we were still in the position. How do you feel about that? I lost by 2 points from a takedown because I couldn't balance. Yeah, stuff like that is just like negligence of the ref. Like they just don't know what to do, so they're like, well, I guess we'll stand him up. That's why it's so important to train judo, because in competitions, like even if stand-up is not your game, it happens so often that the ref is like, well, we're just going to start from the feet now. Even though maybe you spent the entire round trying to not get taken down, and then you finally get to a safe position on the ground, and then it's like you go out of bounds and they stand you up again. That always sucks, because they're never going to take like a guy who's like good at stand-up and top game and be like, you should probably go on bottom for this. Like, let's just like restart, but you go on bottom this time where you're weak. Quick question, but did you completely stop your pursuit of MMA? If yes, then why? Assuming health and money is the reason. The main reason is just like conserving your brain cells. You have to get hit in the head a lot. Like, you gotta, can someone block this guy? Just, there we go. Yeah, mainly just like concussions, worrying about damage to my brain. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the training I did for it. It takes like, the amount of time you have to put in to actually cultivate an MMA career to make money fighting is significant, especially after you spent a significant amount of time practicing just jiu-jitsu and then reaching a point where you can like, make money with it. It's like you kind of have to put that on the back burner and then like refocus on, you have to give all that up that you worked for and then like refocus again on MMA. It seems like for me, it just seemed like a better choice to just focus on jiu-jitsu. It's what I enjoy. I don't really enjoy getting punched in the face. I don't really like thrive in like combat environments. It's not something I want to do all the time. I really just enjoy the technique. I enjoy the hard practice. I enjoy the training, and I like testing my techniques in competition. But the competition is just to test my techniques. It's not like the thing that I do jiu-jitsu for. Do you have any tips on how to deal with added pressure of competing against known competitors? Yeah, that's just your inner conflict. Like, honestly, that feeling is just you battling with yourself. It has nothing to do with the other guy. It's just you thinking that you should do better than you think you're going to do versus person who's supposed to be good, and it's like you doubting yourself and putting expectations on yourself that aren't really accurate or real. If you really were to analyze the situation, you would know that you have nothing to lose and they have something to lose. So you should just fight as hard as you possibly can to try and beat them. Because if you win or you lose, like if you win, that's great. If you lose, who cares? You already knew that the guy's known. It's like, what is it? It doesn't affect you negatively other than in your own mind. Easton said, when people try to worm wrestle with lapel single, I sit to omoplata because they're so committed with that arm on grip. I did it to you once when talking to you, Miha. I did it once am I having trouble reading this? Am I just dyslexic?
We talked about it before a little bit. He was asking if he's defending a single leg or a worm wrestling single leg, and he goes for the omoplata. What happens with the points if you're defending a single leg in the omoplata? Because it is kind of interesting, because if you go for the omoplata, they pull their arm out 2 points, right?
Yeah.
If your omoplata is tight enough, then you get an advantage as well. But what happens, for example, if you go for the omoplata and then you end up on top, 2 points?
I think it goes to whoever started the motion. So if he started the takedown attempt and then he ends up on bottom, it's not 2 points for you. It's just 0-0. But they've changed the takedown rules a few times too, because it used to be that if you did like an ippon, it was 2 points. like regardless of if you ended up on bottom or not. But if you did a clean
Right,
throw,
yeah.
if you did a clean throw, it was 2 points. And then they stopped that, and now it's like if you do a clean throw and you end up on bottom, it's just 0-0. No points for anyone. I'm not sure why they did that.
Yeah.
It seems like it's fine. Like, why not just give someone they go for a big throw, they end up on bottom, who cares? 2 points. Like, they're in a bad position. And that encourages like activity.
Yeah.
Whereas like now it's like you have to be careful. You can't go for big throws because if you overcommit, you're gonna not score for it. Josh, I'm glad you're enjoying them, man. Thanks for coming. Can you sit down to open a match? Only if you make contact with your opponent. So you have to like grip them and then sit. You can't just sit down without touching them, otherwise it's a penalty. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do a few more of these to cover all the details, because I mean, competition is like as in-depth as jiu-jitsu technique, because it's like there's a merger of like the strategy into technique, whereas like strategy starts overlapping with like specific competition techniques. And then as you like move away from the competition strategy, you get more into just like functional jiu-jitsu techniques, which is mostly what we focus on, like on our on Keenan Online and the websites and on the stream. But in like competition training environments, it's like you kind of cut off a lot of like just basic techniques and just assume that everyone knows those, and then you just focus on like that specific area of like strategy, and then techniques that also are important with strategy. And that's like kind of the main focus of competitive grapplers. And I think that's why there's this idea that like competitive grapplers lose touch with being able to like just grapple some guy on the street, you know, because they're so focused on like competitive aspects. But it's really not that hard to just learn the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu and then move past that once you start competing. Like when you're competing, that's the closest you're going to get to like a real fight without actually getting in a real fight, you know? Like it's way more realistic than practicing in the gym. Like you can practice in the gym and get like feel that, but like to actually feel the adrenaline and the fear and like the stress that you're actually going to feel in a real altercation, the only way to get that really is competition. That's the real value of competition, is like, sure, yeah, we're focusing on competition techniques, but at least we know what it's like to be fully adrenalized and have to fight 10 people in a row who all are amped up and crazy. That's beneficial.
But a few people look for like motivation, you know, for jiu-jitsu, and I think competition is a really good one.
Oh,
Either
absolutely.
you taste the sweetness of victory and you're pumped to go, or you feel the agony of defeat and now you're motivated to train again. So.
Yeah, that's a big thing for sure, motivation. It's really nice to have that goal, like be like, I'm trying to do that thing, so I need to train and be prepared, because if I don't fully prepare and I'm out of shape, I'm going to feel really shitty if I lose, you know? I think most confidence in competition comes from just knowing you prepared as best you could. Because there's really nothing wrong with losing if you tried your best, you know? Like just if you really tried your hardest and you know that you weren't making excuses through the training camp, you didn't make excuses for your win or your loss, you don't have people around you making excuses for you, then it like eliminates all the uncertainty of if it's your fault or it's not your fault. And that's really what it comes down to, is just knowing that the outcome was something you could control or not. And like the more you get away from excuses and the idea that it's something out of your control, and then you start focusing on what you can control, which is like how hard you train, how much you study, how much you learn, you know, the deliberate practice, drilling, lifting, all those stuff that you have to do, and it takes like a lot of effort and time and focus and discipline. That's the stuff that gives you confidence, because if you're not doing that, you're just going to be inherently not confident in yourself. So that's like why competition is important too. It keeps you honest, because you're not going to go to a competition. Like if you go and lose a bunch of competitions, you're not going to be able to lie to yourself and say that it's not your fault. It's 100% your fault. You have to be preparing properly if you want to win competitions regularly. It has, like that's also the paradox of it, is like competition can be like should be something that's fun, but if you want to actually win, you have to take it really seriously. Like you can't just go in there and fight these guys who are taking it like their life. Like they're sacrificing a career, they're sacrificing making money to just focus on winning these useless competitions. It's like you can't expect to beat those guys because they're psychos. They're maniacs about it. They'll sleep, you know, in bunk beds in the living room of some guy's house so they can train full time. That level of dedication is very powerful. Much more powerful than most things. All right, we're going to close this up, guys. We've been going for about an hour, almost 2 hours now. We're not blocking people for asking about that specifically. It's just your information is wrong. Like you're just regurgitating stuff that was said by someone that you don't actually even know the story, so it's a waste. Like I don't have time to like the situation was very clear if you actually look at it. You're observing it from the standpoint of like seeing a headline or someone saying something without knowing the full situation.
I just like how he has Zen in the name again, so it was immediately clear that it's the same person.
Right.
And I could just block him immediately, so.
Yeah, it's really very clear what happened. I took a stance in a certain way about trying to take the virus seriously. He got offended for it because I called out his team for kind of like allowing that to happen, and then it went from that to like immediately discrediting me as a person and saying I steal techniques or something. I think if anyone has watched any of these live streams, it's very clear I don't need more technique. Like I'm open to it. I always want to learn new things, but I'm really just like I've got a lot going on already when it comes to technique. I don't really need to go and like cherry pick from people to steal techniques. I'm not really starved for jiu-jitsu knowledge right now.
Also, as the producer of Keenan Online, I also trained in New York. If that day when we were recording, I would for sure tell you if I thought that it's a risky to show that thing.
Yeah, well that's the thing, is people don't even, like, show me the technique, man. Like, saying that I stole something, show me the technique, and then show me where it was stolen from. Show me the reference point. Like, what are you saying is stolen or not? I showed like 8 moves today that I did not create. They're just techniques that exist. Yeah, I don't. That's why I was blocking him. But when they keep coming back with multiple fake usernames, it's like, you have to not ignore it or something. Anyways, anything else? We don't have to end on that note. Do you need to compete a lot to be a good competitor, or can an average guy be successful without a lot of yearly competitions? Kind of like Con Gracie, absolutely. Yeah, there are some people who are just, I call them show ponies. Like in the gym, maybe they don't, there's a lot of guys who in the gym, they're underperformers. It's like, dang, why do you always do so bad in the gym, but you do so good in competition? What's the disconnect there? Well, usually it's because they use their gym time to actually improve. So like, Liera is really good at this, Michael Liera. He's an absolute monster in competition. And in the gym, if you were to watch him roll, it would look like he's not winning as much as he should based on how good he is. But then you realize it's because he's actually really focusing on improving. He's really focusing on trying to be the best version of himself that he can be, and he's willing to sacrifice his wins in the gym for that. And that's what makes those guys really good, is they don't waste their time trying to only win in the gym. They spend their time in the gym trying to get better. And if you're focusing 100% of your time in the gym to getting better and not just like going through the motions, you're going to have a lot more success in competition than the guy who comes into the gym, does A game every single day, tries to win every single day, only doing that and never evolves or adapts. So it's good to lose in the gym, and it's good to be use that as a place of practice and not let that's like the ultimate manifestation of not having an ego. When you can be an accomplished competitor and then go into a training room and not worry about winning or losing. Because that means you kind of mastered your own ego and you don't care about that. And like maybe, I mean, obviously not, you still have an ego because you want to win in competition too, but like separating those two things and being comfortable with it in training is a huge advantage in the competition arena as well. And it's like you have to balance it. You don't want to only be losing in training. But it's like, it's pretty easy to find the guy in the room who you know is most challenging and being like, that's the guy I'm going to try 100% against. And then everyone else I'm going to try and get better with, you know? Or maybe there's 4 guys in the room or 100 guys in the room who can beat you. As long as there's one guy that you can practice like where you're bad at, that's good. But then there's also people who go 100% A game all the time in training and then they win all the time in competition too. It's like, it's not black and white. Like Leandro Lo, as far as I know, he just 100% goes balls to the wall, tries to kill everyone in training all the time, super hard, always fighting to the death, and then he goes to competition, does the same thing. So it's just what works for you, you know? Find what works for you, use everything, you have to try it all. That's why jiu-jitsu takes so long to get good at. You have to try so many things and see what actually works for you and then start building your game. It's not a quick thing. Jiu-jitsu is not a quick journey. It takes a very long time for a multitude of reasons. All right, guys, let's bow it out, even though we didn't bow it in. Thanks, everyone, for coming to my TED Talk on bias refs. We will see you guys tomorrow. What's tomorrow?
Tomorrow we have escape and recover.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a tough one. Let's do it. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow at 5 p.m. for escaping and recovering. Okay? Let's bow it out. Let's get some usses in the chat. Us.
Ooh, forgot the sponsor messages.
Oh, well, we're still here.
Keenan Online, Appelgard,
Guys,
and Tony.
don't forget, to keep the stream alive, please support the merchandise that we have in the description. That's to support Tony as he lives his life here, quarantined. We also, of course, Keenan Online is where you can go to find our full courses. One thing you guys may not realize is Keenan Online is organized in a way that is course-based around specific ideas and systems, whereas what I teach here during the live streams can kind of jump around a little bit more because it's question and answer based most of the time. But if you're looking for structure, which is very important, Keenan Online is the way to go, as well as lapel-specific instruction. Lapel Encyclopedia is still on sale, so that's a great place to start for lapel stuff. And I think the armbar soap sweatsuits are sold out now. There might be like one more black hoodie left. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you all later.